Welcome to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older and So Is My Mom with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services, a show about coping with getting older ourselves and dealing with our aging parents. If you have questions about how to cope with these stresses, call Scott at 877-960-9960. Now, here's Scott.
So welcome back, everybody, to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and So Is My Mom. I hope everybody had a decent Pesach and a happy Easter, whatever you celebrate. I hope you're not sleeping through the show tonight from all the food. Anyway, we have an incredibly interesting guest tonight who is a traditionally trained physician with what some would think has revolutionary ideas about our health. Dr. Stephen Charlap, whose office is in Delray Beach, believes that prevention is infinitely better than cures and cheaper too. I'm sure by the end of the show, you're going to have an awful lot to think about. But before we get to Dr. Charlap, I want to do our Nostalgic America Minute, brought to you by Nostalgic America magazine, available pretty much everywhere. But as you know, Joseph's, Whole Foods, Flakowitz, Way Beyond Bagels down in Boynton Beach, my favorite bagel store when I'm home, and in over 55 communities. The new edition hit the streets today. I just saw it. It has Robert Redford on the cover, and I think you're going to find it great. And as always, there's a wonderful article on page 41 written by yours truly. I think you'll find this one somewhat tongue-in-cheek, called Trick or Treat. Very interesting. So now to the Nostalgic America question, brought to you, of course, by Nostalgic America magazine. I know that all of us are kind of tired of hearing the theory that President Barack Obama is not eligible to serve as president of the United States because some believe he was not born in the United States. This is not the first time that issue has arisen. When Barry Goldwater ran for president, his eligibility was in question as well. And if you know why, call us at 1-877-960-9960. Why was Barry Goldwater's eligibility to run for the presidency of the United States in question? If you know the answer, again, call us 1-877-960-9960. So now on to my guest. Dr. Stephen Charlap is president of MD Prevent. And that is I would say a unique practice, but it's not really that unique. It's just unique in thought and presentation. Dr. Charlap has a very accomplished background, which I'll let him tell you a little bit more about. But in getting to know Dr. Charlap, I know that he sees the need for medicine to evolve from our current uniform focus on cure to a simpler, more focused concentration on prevention. We're going to talk a lot tonight about supplements. Are they good? Are they bad? Are they useless? Anti-aging medications, exactly what are they? Celebrity doctors on radio and television, and much, much more. So Dr. Charlap, welcome to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate being invited onto your show. In terms of background, I graduated from Yeshiva University. Then I went to the New York University School of Medicine, trained in general surgery at the Beth Israel Hospital in New York. Then I attended the Harvard Business School, got an MBA, and in 1989, I founded an organization called Health Drive, which grew to be the largest provider of medical and dental services to the extended care industry. We took care of some 5 million patients over that 20-year period, living in over 1,500 facilities across 13 states. And I always had this philosophy of doing well by doing good. But during that time, thank God I did financially well, but the good was very difficult to measure because of the variable life expectancies of patients, because the government didn't believe in being proactive and anything related to prevention, and also because without demonizing the industry, it's a very tough place to work, and the people who work there can sometimes be challenging to work with. But notwithstanding, I sold that in 2008, and I retired somewhat frustrated that while my organization had provided great care, we didn't do as much good as we could have hoped to do. In 2010, I discovered that for the first time in Medicare's 45-year history, it was about to get serious about prevention by introducing something called the annual wellness visit. This was the first time that Medicare was actually going to pay doctors to listen to their patients and identify risk factors that might lead to disease as opposed to simply treating the symptoms of disease. And as you know, a lot of disease treatment in America has become equivalent to an anecdote I often tell about when we were younger. My father drove a car into a gas station. He drove this old car. The little red light went on in the car. And the people in the gas station said, "Don't worry, we can take care of that. We'll just disconnect the little red light for you." And unfortunately, what happens in medical care today, very often you come in and the doctors simply are trying to control the symptoms because that's what brought you to the doctor. That's what you expect. But the core of medicine is to get to the root cause. And we now know that food is the major cause and cure of most disease.
And I'm talking with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent, which is a practice in Delray Beach. We're going to talk a lot about what MD Prevent does and a little bit more about Dr. Charlap's philosophy. If you have questions for the doctor, please call us at 1-877-960-9960. So you retired in 2008. In 2010, we know a little bit about Medicare because we had a guest on last week who talked about Medicare and specifically focused in on the wellness visit, the checkup. So you started MD Prevent as an outgrowth of your passion for changing the face of medicine from cure to prevention. When did you start that? How did you start it? How did you get to Florida? You know, all of that.
Well, let's step back to the 5 million patients we took care of in the previous organization. When you witness firsthand what happens to so many people who don't take care of their health, develop these chronic, debilitating, expensive diseases, and ultimately end up being institutionalized, and quite frankly, I think it's a very difficult way to end life, you are affected forever. And so when I learned that Medicare was going to give us the tools, the weapons, the means to try to change the course of people's life, I got very excited. And the first thing I did was I went around and spoke to the thought leaders in the United States, the people who have been practicing prevention in one form or another for many years, from Dean Ornish to the Cleveland Clinic to Harvard to Pritikin to Canyon Ranch. I spoke to the people at Loma Linda, the people at the American College of Preventive Medicine. I really spoke to a wide range of people, and I tried to figure out what was missing, why people weren't practicing more prevention in our society. And what I learned was that there were models out there, but they started at the thousands of dollars, $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, basically inaffordable by the average American. And I said, that's why so many people seem to be getting sick, because there's nobody there to give them good advice.
I think, clearly to my listeners, they can feel your passion for this, and I think that's wonderful. Again, you're listening to Scott Greenberg on Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, so is my mom. I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent. And the doctor was just describing how he decided to get into this business. So you did all the research, you got everything together, you moved to Delray, well, to Boca Raton, into the area, and you decided to open this kind of very unique health practice in Delray Beach, this MD Prevent. When did that start? How did that start? And what were you thinking about putting that together? And let the audience know what you were thinking. So
the real planning started in December 2010, and I realized after doing all the research that the key to a successful program was to bring the critical expertise together in one location. And that critical expertise in regards to prevention means an expert in nutrition, an expert in emotional health, an expert in health education, expert in medical care. And so I gathered what I call the dream team of preventioneers, people who are pioneers in prevention, a health psychologist, a health educator, a master's level trained registered dietitian, nutritionist, a master's level yoga certified instructor, nurse practitioners, MDs, all in one location, so we could take a holistic approach to a patient's overall approach to life, their lifestyle, what they're eating, how they're sleeping, what kind of physical activity they're getting in their life, how they're managing stress. Any one of those components gone wrong, and something bad will happen.
So when a patient comes in to the office, I've been to the office. It's beautiful and it's soothing and it's warm, but people don't just walk in, go behind the, I refer to them as the window witch, no offense to those people who do a wonderful job behind the counter. But, you know, you have warm, engaging people meet you. What's the process like when somebody first walks into MD Prevent?
Right. So one of the things you just referred to is the window that you usually encounter in most doctors' offices, where you feel almost bad to knock on the window and disturb the people behind it. In MD Prevent, you're greeted by a concierge desk, by some of the warmest, nicest women that you could ever want to meet in your life. They are genuinely interested in helping you, and that starts the experience from the TV that doesn't show the stock in the news. It shows old TV shows. It brings back the nostalgia of a better time, to the colors, the teal and the yellow, to the inspirational quotes on the walls, to each room having a funny name and each room dedicated to a theme, a sports theme or a movie star theme. We try to create a different type of experience, and it all starts, quite frankly, with an assessment of lifestyle, what we call a health risk assessment, paid 100% by Medicare. It's called the annual wellness visit, where we spend enough time with you so we know why the red light went on, as opposed to what do we do about the red light.
So the initial assessment, we're going to talk more about this. The initial assessment is free because it's covered by Medicare. Assuming you're on Medicare, it's covered by Medicare. And you're listening to Scott Greenberg on Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and so is my mom. I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent. We have many interesting things to talk about, including Dr. Charlap's opinion of celebrity doctors and supplements, and we will be right back.
It's Scott Greenberg, president of Comfort Care Senior Services. And whenever I think about senior services, Scott, I think about Alzheimer's.
You know, Alzheimer's is a silver tsunami. It's growing exponentially. But one of the other things that's important in the care of Alzheimer's patients is the family caregiver. There's an awful lot of family caregiver stress. People not only have to take care of the person who's ill, but they end up losing some of their own independence. They no longer can go out to lunch with their friends. They can't go play golf. Maybe they're not playing canasta or bridge. Sometimes when you can bring a caregiver in who's trained in working with your family or loved one who is suffering from Alzheimer's, gives you the opportunity for some family respite to get out there and take care of yourself. But what we have done here at Comfort Care is that we have sent a number of our caregivers to the Alzheimer's Association that is over and above what the state requires.
Scott Greenberg, Comfort Care Senior Services, 24/7, 561-630-1620.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and so is my mom, with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
So welcome back. I'm here with my guest, Dr. Stephen Charlap, who is the president, founder, and creator of MD Prevent, a wonderful practice in Delray Beach that focuses on prevention instead of cure. We were talking about how the process starts in his office, which I have to tell you is a very unique presentation of a physician's office. It's unlike anything I've ever walked into before. And we were talking about the annual wellness physical, which is covered by Medicare. But you feel strongly, Dr. Charlap, about the difference between wellness and physical intervention. And maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and then we'll move on to some more specifics.
Sure. So we know the industry that takes care of people is called healthcare, but in reality it should be called sick care because it essentially focuses on what has gone wrong. And prevention and wellness is about preventing problems before they happen. And the science now is indisputable. The Centers for Disease Control say the power of prevention now is indisputable. Benjamin Franklin knew this 200 plus years ago when he said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Hippocrates knew it 2,500 years ago when he said prevention is preferable to cure. Our basic premise is if you change certain elements of your lifestyle, you can prevent the development of diabetes, of dementia, of heart disease, of strokes, of heart attacks, even cancer. It's now been proven time and again that these diseases are what we call diseases of affluence. It's based on the way we live today. It's based on the way we live our lives, the way we conduct ourselves, the way we deal with stress. Things are making us sick, and yet there's something we can do about it. And MD Prevent is all about showing you what you can do about it, and spending enough time with you to learn what is bothering you. For example, I gave you an anecdote earlier today that a patient came in today, let's call him David to disguise his name, and he was about to leave our waiting area. He said, I'm pretty healthy. I'm 80 years old. I don't really have any problems. I'm not sure I need this annual wellness visit. And I engaged him in a conversation, and we started talking about things, and we talked about the food he eats and how he exercises and so on and so forth. And I finally convinced him to come back to the back room. And when we were in the back room, he tells me that he is waking up in the middle of the night coughing. And I said, I suspect you have sleep apnea. And he says, and the problem is less so when I sleep on an elevated bed. And I said, now I'm pretty sure that you have sleep apnea. Well, sleep apnea is a life-threatening condition. And if I had not engaged him in this conversation, he may have left to go untreated, and that could have killed him prematurely.
I mean, it's really interesting. I don't think anybody out there would argue the point that prevention is so much more important than cure. But you're right. We really don't take care of ourselves, and we usually only go to the doctor when we have something going wrong. And we are not proactive. We are reactive. You're listening to Scott Greenberg, and oh my God, I'm getting older, and so is my mom, and we're on Seaview Radio. If you have questions for the doctor, please call us at 1-877-960-9960. So let's talk about some of the things that I know raise your ire some. You're not a huge fan of supplements, are you?
I'm not, and quite frankly, you might be surprised by that, because I have a mother who at a very young age, when I was very young, was reading Prevention Magazine and was routinely recommending supplements to me, as was the standard of prevention in the early days. So I came into this believing that supplements were a good thing, and in fact, when I first conceived MD Prevent, we went out and bought thousands of dollars worth of supplement, which, by the way, now we have completely rid ourselves of it, because the further I dug, the more studies I looked at, particularly some huge studies that have come out, I discovered that supplements are the biggest hoax perpetrated in the United States. They've gone from a $5 billion to $100 billion industry in 15 years, and including the whole anti-aging medicine field, and yet they have not demonstrated to extend life by 1 day in a single human study. It's a hoax.
I think you don't feel too strongly about that, do you?
I can't possibly feel stronger, because the studies show that not only do most supplements not help you, but they increase death rates. They increase cancer, they increase diabetes, they increase heart disease. So you think you're doing something to help yourself because somebody somewhere in some magazine or some TV show told you that you should be taking it, and in fact you're causing your body harm.
I know right before we went on the air, we had a brief conversation about multivitamins. You had an interesting observation about multivitamins, which I acknowledge I've been taking for 45 years, and I didn't have the answer to your questions.
Right. The presumption is that multivitamins are good for you, okay, which, by the way, is an old wives' tale, which now has been rebuked. David Katz, the head of Yale's preventive medicine program, is against it. The woman who published a study 10 years ago in the Journal of the American Medical Association, Kathleen Fairfield, which may have triggered this whole supplement explosion, now is anti-multivitamins. And the biggest problem with multivitamins is that the presumption is if a little bit is good for you, a lot is even better. So you don't need 100% of the recommended daily allowance. You need 30 times, 300 times, 30,000 times the dose. And so people think mega is better because I'm getting more for the same money. All you're getting is potentially more sickness for the same money.
So if you feel strongly about supplements or have other questions for Dr. Charlap, call us at 1-877-960-9960. So you feel the huge need to differentiate between diet and supplements, and that you feel that you can get pretty much anything you need by a good, sound, healthy diet. Am I right?
There's no question. From an evolutionary perspective, okay, we didn't have pills. In fact, the first vitamin was sold in this country in 1934. So prior to that, you couldn't even take a dietary supplement in pill form. You could only eat natural foods. And man and his predecessor has been eating natural foods for millions of years, okay? So the difference between a natural vitamin and a vitamin in a jar, chemically, there's no difference. But the difference when you eat a vitamin or mineral in a fruit is it's surrounded by enzymes and coenzymes, precursors, activators, synergistic nutrients, all the friends that make sure that the body absorbs it properly. But when you take it in a chemical form, isolated in a bottle, it can act very different. I gave you an example about beta-carotene. 20 years ago, beta-carotene was all the rage. Okay? Now you don't hear it mentioned. Why? Because beta-carotene in carrots continues to be very healthy. But take beta-carotene in an isolated pill, and what happens is it's an antioxidant. It neutralizes free radicals that are doing damage by giving up one of its electrons. But what happens to the beta-carotene? It becomes a more powerful, lethal free radical, and then the free radical is neutralized, and they found out that the beta-carotene was causing more damage than it was preventing.
So, I mean, I guess I have so many questions. I kind of don't know where to go first with this. I take fish oil every day. I take calcium. I take all of these things, and I still eat a pretty healthy diet. So what you're basically saying is, if I've got the natural 100% daily recommended dose of whatever vitamins I get from the fruit I eat and the vegetables I eat, that taking additional supplements really doesn't do anything, and in fact could be harmful.
Right. Well, there are rare exceptions. Vitamin D3, which is typically produced by exposure to the sun, for many people, they have a vitamin D deficiency because they don't get enough sun exposure. Or vegans who don't eat chicken, fish, or meat may not have a lot of B12. But my belief is don't treat deficiencies unless you identify deficiencies. Otherwise, you're over-supplementing. And there's a theory called hormesis when it comes to antioxidants that says that our body is a very powerful disease-fighting entity, and it defeats cancer all the time that we're not even aware of. But if you overload the body with these supplements, you run the risk of suppressing your normal immune function and making yourself more susceptible to some of the worst diseases we know.
So this is Scott Greenberg, and you're listening to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and So Is My Mom. I'm here with a very passionate physician, Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent, who has a very unique wellness practice, I will call it, if that's acceptable, in Delray Beach, Florida. If you have questions for Dr. Charlap or for myself, or if you know the answer to the Nostalgic American Minute question, you can call us at 1-877-960-9960.
It's Scott Greenberg, president of Comfort Care Senior Services, a non-medical home care service. Are there any highly specialized skills that you train your caregivers with?
You know, one of the things we do that's different, Terry, is that I've actually hired a rabbi who comes in periodically and works with my caregivers on maintaining a traditional kosher home. There's a lot of people down here that require someone who is at least familiar with the traditional Jewish kosher home and the Jewish traditions.
When it comes to Alzheimer's, how about the caregiver?
The family caregiver is struggling with caregiver stress in a way that most people are just not familiar with. Sometimes, while it's very important to help a family member who has Alzheimer's, it's equally important to help the family member who is taking care of that family member. And so we can provide services for a few hours a day to allow the family member to get out, play a little golf, go have lunch with a friend, go to the beauty parlor, whatever it takes to give them a break so that when they come home, they're better able to deal with their family member struggling with Alzheimer's.
Scott Greenberg, president of Comfort Care Senior Services, 561-630-1620.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and So Is My Mom, with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
So I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent, and if you have questions for Dr. Charlap, I encourage you to call 1-877-960-9960. We're talking about a fresh approach to the practice of medicine, focusing on prevention, diet, exercise, and health, as opposed to cures, not walking in only when something is wrong, or as we said earlier, when the red light goes on, but trying to be proactive and in control of your own lives. I know you blog a lot, or have started to blog a lot, and you write regularly. You've been blogging about longevity clubs. Right. What exactly is a longevity club?
So one of the areas that I've really focused on, because I think this is what it's all about at the end of the day, is longevity, is I've studied the field of longevity. I spoke to the head of the New England Centenarian Study, Dr. Thomas Pearls, and I read The Longevity Project, and I read Aging Well, and a number of other books, including Dan Buettner's Blue Zones. A colleague from mine of business school referred me to it, and I did a quick review. The Okinawans, which have the highest rate of centenarians in the world, it's said somewhere between 3.5 times to 10 times the American rate. I think it's about 3.5 times. They form these clubs that are called Moai, M-O-A-I, where people get together and they become dependent on each other to help each other through tough spots. And while Facebook is come to define social networks here in America. You know, you have a strong social networks if you have 200 friends on Facebook. The reality is we all need more human contact. And my concept is we should bring together people who have shared interests, who are interested in helping each other and banding together and solving their problems and figuring out how to lead healthier, more meaningful, longer lives. And so the concept came to me the other day that I should form something called the Longevity Club, and I should get people for almost nothing just to cover the cost of it, because, as you know, I don't have a profit motive. I just want to basically change people's lives for the better and start forming these clubs where people help each other.
So, again, I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent, and we're talking about a fresh look at helping us age healthily by eating well and reducing the amount of supplements. So what do you think it is that lets people get to be 100 years old? I mean, you talked about centenarians, and it is the fastest growing demographic percentage-wise because we're starting at a small base. So, what do we have to do to get there?
So first, let me tell you what doesn't play as big a role as most people think, and that is genetics. It turns out we know from a major study called the Swedish Twin Study that was completed in the 1950s that reviewed 25,000 sets of twins in Sweden that had been separated at birth and lived different lifestyles, that genetics is only about 25 to 30% of the factor that affects our overall health and life. 10% is actually iatrogenic. It's caused by physicians. Physicians actually have a big impact on whether we live and die, fortunately or unfortunately. But 60% is all about environmental factors, and primarily those environmental factors are the foods that we eat.
Right. Now, you were talking about, and you compare it, the longevity clubs, social networking, helping people. You know, in my industry, and I don't talk a lot about my industry here, there is a concept now of the village concept, not the villages up in Ocala, although it is not dissimilar in the fact that people get together so that they can help each other overcome whatever difficulties they're coming from. Is that kind of the same thing that you're talking about?
Well, there's a number of factors. If you look at the Okinawans in Japan, if you look at the Sardinians in Italy, if you look at the people in Costa Rica, the Pakistanis, and most importantly here in the United States, the Seventh-day Adventists, there are very common traits among them. Among those traits are they eat mostly a plant-based diet. They have very strong social networks. They stay physically active all day, okay? The Okinawans are not going to gyms in the island. But at the same time, when they go away from their villages and they hang out at the U.S. Air Force Naval Base in Okinawa, when they move to Japan and Hawaii, their health does deteriorate. We know the strong social networks. We know the way they deal with stress. The Seventh-day Adventists don't work from Friday night to Saturday night, and they take long nature walks. Family is very important to them. Their social network is very important. So it's all the basic tenets. They're eating well, they're staying physically active, they're staying mentally sharp by their connections to other people, they're dealing with stress by having a good support network. These are the key factors that contribute to a long, healthy, meaningful life.
Terrific. So on that note, then, you're not a terribly huge fan of celebrity doctors or doctors who know a little bit about everything. I know we've not to single any one out in particular, but I know Dr. Oz doesn't rise up to the top of your list, or not the most favorite list. So talk to me a little bit about that. Talk to me about why you're so passionate about that as well.
So one of the things that I've discovered, and I think to quote Mark Twain, it ain't what you know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that does. And I give lots of lectures. And during those lectures, the audience peppers me with questions. And there is an instinct, an innate desire to want to please the audience. And so they ask you questions, and you want to seem like you always know the answer. But sometimes you simply don't know the answer. And it's embarrassing, but it's necessary to say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer. Or no, I don't know that abbreviation. Or I don't know that drug. I need to get back to you. And what happens with celebrity doctors, when they get to a certain level, they don't want to tell the audience that they can't answer a question. They want to seem like they're all-knowing and then they're in control. And that becomes problematic. That's problem number one. Problem number two, the doctor doesn't know the patient. And it's ridiculous to give medical advice to people across the airwaves and say one size fits all, because that is never the case. People are individuals. They eat different. They have different life situations. They have different genetic predispositions. They have different financial and economic and social strata. They are different. And one advice does not fit all.
When we were preparing for the show last week, when I was in your office, we talked a little bit about, I don't know who it was precisely, but somebody talked about 2 aspirin versus 1 aspirin. I thought that was pretty interesting. Maybe you could tell the audience.
Right, so I'm going to give you 2 examples. First, I'll tell you one, and I'll come back to the aspirin. Last Friday on the Dr. Oz show, he recommends something called Schizandra berries. Schizandra berries, he says, improves your skin, increases your energy, and it does something else for you. And I went to this database created by a Harvard pharmacist and a Harvard MD called Natural Standard. They don't take any commercial money in terms of advertising. They don't sell any products. It's a pure database to take all the studies done on supplements, and they assign grades to it, A, B, C, D, and E. Okay, so I look up Schizandra berry, and what do I find? There is not one human study supporting any of the indications that Dr. Oz gave. And I immediately tweeted to the audience that was willing to listen, do not use this product. It is not supported by the science. 2 weeks ago on the show, he recommends 2 baby aspirins for every patient to lower blood pressure. First of all, I don't know of any science about baby aspirins lowering blood pressure. I do know they avoid platelet aggregation. They prevent platelet aggregation that can lead to clots, and that can be very dangerous. But there are contraindications to aspirin, and in fact, most doctors only recommend 1 baby aspirin. So here he's recommending 2. One of the top 4 reasons people are admitted to nursing to emergency rooms is bleeding secondary to aspirin. So aspirin is not indicated in every patient's medical cabinet, and here he is just routinely recommending everybody take 2 baby aspirins when one of these people might have a bleed that kills them.
Yeah, or they might be on blood thinners. I mean, they could be, right? I mean, they could be on blood thinners, or there could be tremendous counter indications. I've often kind of felt the same way, although I never articulated quite like you. Again, this is Scott Greenberg, and you're listening to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, So Is My Mom, and I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap, who, if you've been listening, is obviously quite passionate about his craft, and you can reach us at 1-877-960-9960. But you're right. These doctors seem to want to know a little bit of, want to have the answer to everything.
They want to pretend like they know the answer to everything.
I know that you don't know the answer to this. I understand that you don't know the answer to it. But why would Dr. Oz recommend this berry that you were just talking about if there's no history out there? Where did that come from?
So interesting.
How does that happen?
Sure. So interesting enough, I sent him a letter a few weeks ago, and I said, I think that your first obligation as a physician is to do no harm. And if you're going to recommend something on your show, you have 3 obligations. 1, to disclose whether or not you have a financial incentive in recommending that product. 2, to disclose all studies supporting and refuting the use of that product. And 3, to very clearly state to the audience that no one should ever take a supplement without first consulting with their physician, because many supplements can interfere with medications or can exacerbate existing conditions. So I said, if you don't do that and someone gets hurt, and quite frankly, someone's probably been hurt already, or it's just a matter of time to a lot of people are harmed by his suggestions, he will be liable. If not in a court of law, then morally.
So, I think I talk an awful lot about transition to care. There's obviously a huge emphasis on reducing preventable readmissions to the hospital, particularly for pneumonia or CHF. hospitals are going to start being dinged pretty quickly if they have over the average number of readmissions. I talk about this on this show regularly. The average Medicare discharge from a hospital is on 13 medications, oftentimes prescribed by more than one doctor, oftentimes 3 doctors. And when we do a medication reconciliation, when I open a case, we need to not only see the medications, we need to talk about all the supplements that they're on as well, because they may be counterindicative of ongoing problems. Am I right?
Absolutely. And that's what was so incredible about the annual wellness visit. It requires doctors to chart every supplement that the patient is taking. And that requires a doctor in good faith to look at the supplements, to look at the products, to look at the ingredients, and figure out, is the patient taking 5 different sources of vitamin D? Because before I mentioned vitamin D is healthy. However, in very high dosages, it becomes toxic. Calcium. Most women are on calcium. It turns out that while calcium decreases hip fractures, and that's why women take it, it also increases calcification of arteries that contribute to heart attacks. So there is no one size fits all. And we find a lot of patients on antidepressant medications. I had a woman a couple of weeks ago, I say, why are you on this antidepressant? She says, 10 years ago, I was having trouble selling my house. So I was anxious, and the doctor put me on an antidepressant. I've been on it ever since. I said, have you sold another house since then? She says, no. I said, are you still anxious about selling houses? She says, no. I said, so why do you keep taking an antidepressant? Antidepressants have consequences. So do antipsychotics, anti-anxiety, anti-sleep medications.
So we're going to come right back with Dr. Stephen Charlap and talk more about the things that he thinks are important in prevention as opposed to cure. And you can call us if you have a question for Dr. Charlap at 1-877-960-9960.
Scott Greenberg, President and CEO of Comfort Care Senior Services. What sets you apart from the other guys?
Well, Terry, one of the big things is that we're a home health agency, not a nurse registry. All our caregivers are employees. They're licensed, they're bonded, they're covered by supplemental insurance, so that's a big difference. We specialize in all the diseases that are most common in our senior population. We have a special training for Alzheimer's patients. We're still the only agency that has worked with the Alzheimer's Association to train our caregivers on providing an extra level of care. We also are working closely with the Parkinson's Education Network.
When it comes to long-term care, is insurance accepted?
There are many long-term care insurance company policies out there, and we accept them all. What it does is it has the ability to extend your benefits because it costs less. If you are eligible for veterans benefits, aid and attendance benefits, we can work with you to help secure those. And of course, there are private pay options as well.
Scott Greenberg, President, CEO of Comfort Care Senior Services, 561-630-1620, Comfort Care Senior Services.
Welcome back to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older and So Is My Mom with Scott Greenberg of Comfort Care Senior Services on Seaview Radio, 95.9 FM, 106.9 FM, and 960 AM. Reach Scott with your questions, 877-960-9960. Now, back to Scott.
So I am here tonight with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent, who is nothing if not passionate about his practice, and he feels truly that prevention is worth, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We have so much to talk about, and not all that much time to talk about it. But I do want to ask a question about, last week we had a conversation about caveat lector. Maybe you could give us some idea of what caveat lector is.
Sure. So most people have heard of the phrase caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. And in Latin, caveat lector means let the reader beware. Unfortunately, most people get their information from reading sources, and it turns out that the media has a reason to present information in such a way as to make it interesting. So, for example, it turns out that if you have diabetes plus depression, your risk for developing dementia goes up 100%. So the headline says, diabetes plus depression doubles the risk for dementia. But it turns out it only increases it in an absolute perspective from 1% to 2%. So that's not something to be overly concerned about because 1% more. Or when we talk about statins. It's known that statins decrease heart attacks by 33%. That's the relative risk decrease. But the absolute risk decrease is from 3 out of 100 people to 2 out of 100 people. So it turns out that 100 people have to take a statin for one person to get a benefit, and 2 people still get a heart attack. And that's where what you read becomes very confusing. Because if you only read the headline, or if you only read the media summary of the study, you don't really know if they're reporting the relative risk or the absolute risk. And so I say to people, caveat lector, let the reader beware. Don't believe everything you read. And in fact, that's what doctors are for. Come to the doctor, call the doctor, email the doctor. I give people out my personal cell phone and I say, call me anytime. I'm happy to take your call.
So I just had a caller who does want to call you, but he wants to know how to call you and the proper spelling of your name. So I will tell the proper spelling is Dr. Stephen, Steven, Charlap, Charlap. And how do they reach you, Dr. Charlap?
They can call the main office at 561-807-2561, or they can call my cell phone, 617-319-6434.
I haven't had very many doctors give their cell phone out on the air, but I think the whole conversation, again, I'm here with Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent. And again, for the listener who called in, Charlap. And you're listening to Oh My God, I'm Getting Older, and so is my mom on Seaview Radio. If anybody has a question and wants to talk to the doctor, you can call 1-877-960-9960. I have so much to still talk to you about. I don't know where to go first, but let's talk about a health benefits reward program that focuses on prevention. I know that's along with the caveat lector conversation in terms of absolute versus relational data. Talk a little bit about health benefits rewards.
Well, health benefit rewards was the name of an act that 2 congressmen, a Republican and a Democrat, proposed in Congress last week. And it's really mind-boggling what the act entails. It serves to want to provide $400 in annual incentives to get seniors to come in and take advantage of over $1,000 of free preventive benefits, because the government can't figure out why people are not taking better care of their health and why they're not taking advantage of these incredible new services. In fact, I'm not quite frankly, a great fan of President Obama in general, but I think Obamacare deserves to stand because most people don't know many of the provisions of Obamacare specifically related to innovations in healthcare and money set aside for prevention. Again, an ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure. And most of the times when we talk about prevention in this country, we talk about diagnostic tests and supplements. But that's not primary prevention. Primary prevention is lifestyle modification. And the government is now putting billions of dollars behind that effort to help people avoid diabetes.
Would it be safe to say that you see the role of a physician's office more as an oasis or a haven to get you to a better future instead of back to neutral? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way it should be. Unfortunately, again, look, I have an older brother. He's a cardiologist and internist. He's an incredibly great doctor, generally cares about the patients. He's 4 or 5 years older than me. He still works to 9, 10 o'clock at night. He still takes call every third night. He's making a fraction of what he used to make, okay? I believe half of what he used to make, because the system just keeps crushing down on doctors. And if they want to pay for their kids' private education in college, they're just trying to keep up. And that's why he still works like a dog. The problem is the system has set up doctors to focus on the disease, to control the symptoms, to get the patients in and out as quickly as possible and as happy as possible. That's what was so special about these Medicare changes. And if Obamacare gets repealed, many of these things are going away, and it will be the single greatest tragedy in the American healthcare's history if we lose these preventive benefits, because they can make a huge difference for people.
So Dr. Charlap is certainly thought-provoking, I would say, and open and honest. I want to digress for a minute to go back to the Nostalgic America question. brought to you, as it is each week, by Nostalgic America magazine. I said earlier, the new edition just hit the streets, and it is available at Whole Foods, at Joseph's, at the Boulevard, at Flakowitz, at Way Beyond Bagels, at over 55 communities, up and down the beach in many of the condominium communities. This edition has a more sports theme, but not exclusively. It's got wonderful photographs. I was going through them when I came into the studio tonight with the station manager. And again, there's a great article on page 41 by yours truly. It has Robert Redford on the cover, and I encourage you to pick up a copy of Nostalgic America magazine. I think I asked the question, we were talking about Barack Obama just a minute ago, that a lot of people think he didn't qualify as being able to be president of the United States because a lot of people think he wasn't born here. As I said earlier, that wasn't the first time that issue arose. Barry Goldwater, when he ran for president, came under a lot of scrutiny. Nobody seemed to know why, but I'll tell you why. Barry Goldwater was, in fact, born in Arizona, but Arizona was not yet a state when he was born, so that when he ran for president, there was some question as to whether he was a natural-born U.S. citizen. So that question brought to you by Nostalgic America magazine, available everywhere, the new edition out today. I want to take a second also and talk about my guests for the next couple of weeks. You know, many of you have been in your home for 40 years or more, or mom or dad have been in your home for 40 years or more. You're about to downsize. Mom or dad is going into an independent or assisted living facility. Somebody is moving in or getting rid of what seems like a lifetime's worth of treasure. Is it all treasure or not? I don't know. But Karen Harvey from Senior Transition Solutions, who is a senior move expert and who specializes in helping people downsize and get the most out of their get the most both emotionally and financially, get the most out of their possessions, learn what's important and what's not. She's going to be our guest next week. And I got a call on Friday from a client telling me how much Comfort Care helped her. And it was a very emotional call for me, particularly because she's no longer a client. She moved from Boynton Beach to New Jersey. And she was nice enough to call me and thank me again for everything that we at Comfort Care had done for her. And so I said to her out of the blue, so how's the move going? Because she's selling her home. And she said, don't ever do it. But if you have to do it, Karen Harvey is a person who can help you do that. And she is from Senior Transition Solutions, and she will be my guest next week. In 2 weeks, I'm going to have another physician on the show, a physician who's been on the show before, Dr. Richard Levine, who is a fabulous doctor from Priority Concierge MD. And we're going to be talking about two very important topics. We're going to be talking about what is the most common reason that people expire in any particular decade of life, in the teens, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. I think you'll find that fascinating, as I did when we started to talk about it. And he's also going to be talking about what to look for as warning signs of various important diseases. And he's going to be on in a couple of weeks so that you can get to the doctor sooner rather than later, which is in keeping in part with the conversation we're having tonight with my guest, Dr. Stephen Charlap of MD Prevent. So, Dr. Charlap, again, we still have so much to talk about, but one of the things that's important to me is you really focus on separating fact from fiction and trying to identify the reality from the perception. So thought is not fact. Am I right?
Absolutely. One of the sayings that had a big influence on me was something that I read that Hippocrates said, which is there are two things, to know and to think you know. To know is science, to think you know is ignorance. And I'm not interested in giving people information unless I have validated it. And if I haven't been able to validate it, I tell them, this is what I know, this is how I know it, this is where I know it from, and this is how much I think you can depend upon it. I think it's very important that doctors not pretend to know more than they know. I think it's very important that we genuinely put the patient's interest first, that we first do no harm. And in the creating MD Prevent, the basic premise was there's a lot of information there that can change people's lives. You don't have to wait till you're diagnosed with cancer or diabetes or dementia or heart disease. There's something you can do about it now. The government is paying you money basically by taking your money and applying it towards prevention and wellness. And doctors like us, and if you're not interested in coming to MD Prevent, then go to a doctor that will do this service correctly. And by correctly, I don't mean a 15-minute visit. I mean 45 minutes to an hour and a half, the time necessary to answer all your questions. I often ask patients, how much time do you spend with your doctors? Because I discovered that about 45 minutes, patient tells me things they've never told anybody before. And the reason is because most doctors don't have the time to spend with patients anymore. But we give patients all the time they want because we don't have a profit motive. We have one interest, and that is to make their lives better. That's why I give my cell phone out. In my last organization, I gave it out over 1 million times. I am genuinely interested in making the world a better place, and I commit myself towards that end. I've committed to never taking a penny out of MD Prevent because I don't need the money. I just need the satisfaction of knowing I've helped other people. That's what MD Prevent is about. That's the people I've surrounded myself at MD Prevent. That's what makes us unique among all medical practices in Southeast Florida.
And since today is Monday, you feel strongly about Mindfulness Monday. Do you want to tell us a little about that?
We do. Well, our health psychologist, Dr. Jessica Kordansky, who trained at Emory, who's a PhD in psychology, leads a group in mindfulness, helping people deal with the difficult things that they deal with in life, and allows them to get into the moment and appreciate life more and recognize that the glass is usually half full, not half empty. Mindfulness helps people get to a better place. And guess what? We're abusing antidepressants, as I mentioned earlier, antipsychotics. People are struggling in this society, and yet simple things like spending an hour with someone as wonderful as Dr. Kordansky can make such a difference in their lives. You just sometimes need somebody to remind you of the things that you should be grateful for and the things that are going right, as opposed to thinking all the time that whatever negative thoughts you have somehow is a fact. Because as you said, Scott, thoughts are not facts.
So we need a team of experts. Not one size fitting all, am I right?
Correct, and that's why we put together a team of experts, an expert in nutrition, an expert in emotional health, an expert in physical fitness, an expert in health education. On our staff, we have a woman, Dr. Deborah Faust, who has the equivalent of a PhD. It's called an Ed.D. in health education. I brought together the dream team of people dedicated to making life better for others. There's nothing like it in the country that I know of, except where you pay $5,000, $10,000. And here, we accept whatever we're paid by the government.
And so how do people reach you again, and where are you?
To call us, 561-807-2561. We are in Delray Beach on the corner of Military and Linton in what's called the Palm Court Plaza on the campus of Delray Medical Center at 5130 Linton Boulevard, Suite H1. I built a 4,500 square facility that not only has the traditional trappings of a normal primary care doctor's office, but has a kitchen where we do cooking demonstrations. Just last week, our nutritionist, master's level trained from New York University, Lisa Siemens, led a class on preparing healthy desserts. Most people say the diet buster for them is dessert, and Lisa showed them how you can still put together a delicious, delectable dessert and not ruin your diet over it. And that class was offered for $20 a person. It cost me more in food and time to prepare the class than we took in. We don't care. We just want to change people's lives. We've got educational classrooms. We've got fitness classrooms. We do silver sneakers. We do yoga. We charge $5 per yoga class. We're giving it away.
So if you want to know more about MD Prevent, you can reach that on the web at mdprevent.net. Their phone number is 561 807-2561. I want to thank Dr. Charlap for being here tonight, and I appreciate his passion and his commitment and his focus. And we have to take ownership of our quality of life. And on that note, oh my God, I'm getting older, so is my mom. We'll see you.